In the shadowed heart of ancient Babylon, where the Euphrates whispered secrets through reed-lined banks and ziggurats clawed the sky with stone fingers, a feast unlike any other was being prepared, a gathering drenched in opulence and whispered dread. It was the first feast of the new king, Nebuchadnezzar's heir, a celebration meant to seal his claim to the throne and send a warning to those who dared challenge his power. Yet beneath the gleaming gold cups and shimmering silks lay a festering rot of fear, betrayal, and doom. The city itself was a labyrinth of tight alleyways and towering walls, thrumming with the pulse of countless souls, merchants, slaves, priests, and warriors, all bound together by the merciless will of kings and gods. The feast was to be held in the great palace courtyard, where mosaics of lapis lazuli and carnelian glittered like stars under flickering torchlight, and the air was thick with the scent of myrrh-roasted meats and wine so potent it promised to drown the senses. Yet, as the sun dipped beneath the horizon, casting the city into twilight's cruel embrace, an ominous hush fell over the palace. The servants moved like shadows, their eyes darting with secrets best left unspoken. Among them, Ishtar, a young servant girl whose delicate frame belied the storm raging within her, a storm born of survival, despair, and a whispered prophecy that the feast would be a harbinger of death. The guests arrived, a parade of Babylon's elite, priests draped in white linen, their faces marked with the sacred ash of ritual purity, generals whose scars told tales of bloodshed and conquest, nobles whose laughter rang hollow beneath their jeweled masks. They reclined on low couches, their fingers adorned with rings heavy enough to sink ships, their tongues sharp and eager for the decadence promised. The first course was brought forth, trays heaped with exotic fruits, dates dripping with honey, pomegranates bursting with ruby seeds, figs as soft as a lover's sigh. Yet beneath the sweetness lurked a bitterness, a subtle poison delivered not by the hand of the gods, but by mortal hands skilled in darker arts. A curse woven into the feast itself, meant to thin the crowd, to test loyalty, and to punish the disloyal. As Ishtar watched from the shadows, her heart pounding like a war drum, she saw the first victim, a senator whose greed had made him many enemies, clutch his throat as his face twisted in agony. His collapse was met with gasps, but the feast continued. The guests, unwilling to believe the sinister pattern unfolding before their eyes, the second course arrived, roasted lamb glazed with fragrant spices, a delicacy fit for kings. But with it came the whisper of betrayal, whispers that this was no ordinary meal, that hidden in the sumptuous dishes were elements designed to fracture alliances and ignite ancient vendettas. The air grew thick with suspicion as eyes shifted and hands tightened around goblets. Among the guests, the high priest, Zabdiel, a man as cold and calculating as the desert night, watched with cruel satisfaction. His plan was unfolding perfectly. Years of scheming, whispered bargains with shadowy priests and sorcerers had led to this moment, a purge disguised as celebration, each poisoned bite a stroke in the deadly dance he choreographed. Ishtar's breath caught as she realized the truth. She was not merely a servant, but a pawn in a game that would spill blood and shatter lives. Her only hope lay in secrets she carried, secrets whispered to her by the temple oracle, visions of fire and ruin, of the city consumed by its own decadence and treachery. The feast pressed on, each course more decadent, more dangerous than the last. Wine flowed like rivers of blood, laughter turned to screams, and the night descended into chaos. The rich and powerful, drunk on hubris and poison, began to fall one by one, their faces contorted in horror, their screams swallowed by the cold stones of the palace. Outside, the city remained oblivious to the carnage unfolding within its walls, a city that would soon awaken to a dawn darker than any before, a dawn stained with betrayal, death, and the bitter taste of survival's cruel price. As the moon rose high above Babylon's labyrinthian streets, casting a cold silver light over the towering walls and bustling bazaars, inside the palace, the atmosphere thickened with dread and whispered curses. The great feast had become a grotesque spectacle, a twisted play of power and death, staged beneath the flickering torchlight. Each bite of food, each sip of wine, became a gamble with fate, a wager many were already losing. Ishtar, once a mere shadow in the palace's grand tapestry, now found herself bound to a destiny darker than the night itself. Her hands trembled as she moved quietly between the fallen guests, the echoes of their final, strangled cries haunting the cavernous halls. The senator who had collapsed was already laid out in the antechamber, his skin pale as dried parchment, eyes glazed over in eternal accusation. But his was only the first. The roasted lamb, so tender and perfumed with cinnamon and coriander, had concealed a toxin as subtle as the serpent's kiss. It was said to be a concoction brewed in the secret chambers beneath the temple, a poison known only to those who trafficked in death disguised as sacred medicine. The high priest Zabdiel had orchestrated its delivery with the precision of a master artist painting a macabre masterpiece. From the shadows, the priests whispered incantations, their voices weaving spells meant to bind the souls of the dying to the will of the gods, or perhaps to the will of Zabdiel himself. The courtyard, once resplendent with the gleam of polished bronze and the scent of jasmine, was now a theater of suffering. The nobles writhed and convulsed, their silver goblets spilling cursed wine as they clutched their chests, their faces twisted in unholy torment. Amidst this chaos, Ishtar's mind raced. She remembered the oracle's prophecy, the warning given in cryptic riddles beneath the moon's pale gaze. "The feast shall be a doorway to shadows," the oracle had whispered, "where tongues will falter, and the throne shall be stained with the blood of kin." The girl knew she was the keeper of a secret too terrible to bear, yet too vital to conceal. Zabdiel's cold eyes met hers briefly across the hall. There was no mercy there, only the ruthless calculation of a man who had sacrificed humanity for power. His hands, adorned with rings engraved with the sigils of ancient gods, rested calmly on the marble balustrade as if overseeing a simple game, not the massacre unfolding before him. But fate, ever cruel and unpredictable, had other designs. The general, a giant of a man named Mardequence, a fierce warrior, now a victim of poisoned hospitality, collapsed near the fountain where water shimmered like liquid glass under the torchlight. His fall splashed droplets onto the mosaic floor, fragments of blue and gold that seemed to mock the fleeting grandeur of life. Ishtar seized the moment, slipping away from the suffocating tableau of death to the servants' quarters. There, hidden beneath layers of soot and shadow, she uncovered a small vial sealed with crimson wax, the antidote. It was a fragile hope, a slim thread to clutch amidst the unraveling nightmare. But to whom should she give it? To the king's son? To the broken general? Or to herself? To survive and bear witness? The sound of footsteps, heavy and purposeful, echoed from the grand hall. Zabdiel approached, flanked by guards whose eyes gleamed with fanatic devotion. His voice, smooth and cold as obsidian, called out to the remaining guests. "The gods demand sacrifice," he proclaimed, "and Babylon shall be purified through fire and blood." The courtyard erupted in chaos anew. Those still standing, trembling on the edge between life and death, turned against each other in frenzied desperation. Friendships shattered, alliances crumbled like brittle clay. The feast had become a crucible, burning away pretenses to reveal the raw, savage hunger beneath. Ishtar's heart pounded as she darted through the corridors, the vial clutched tightly in her palm. Her every breath was a prayer, every shadow a threat. She knew that if she were caught, the secrets she carried would die with her, and so too would any hope of salvation for Babylon's doomed heirs. As the night deepened, a sinister figure emerged, a whisper on the wind, a ghost cloaked in the finery of death. It was the king's younger brother, a man whose smile concealed knives sharper than any forged in the city's smithies. He moved with the silent grace of a predator, his eyes fixed on the chaos as if savoring the downfall of his enemies. His arrival tipped the scales. The final act of the feast's grim drama was about to unfold, a dance of vengeance and despair written in blood and shadow. The walls of Babylon seemed to close in, the very stones trembling with the weight of untold horrors. And in the midst of it all, Ishtar stood small, fragile, but fierce, a flicker of light in the overwhelming darkness. The fate of the feast, the city, and perhaps the world itself rested on the fragile thread of her courage. Dawn threatened to break, but the palace was swallowed by a darkness far deeper than the absence of sunlight. The air hung heavy, saturated with the iron scent of blood and the bitter stench of betrayal. The feast had devoured its guests whole. But the true horror was only beginning to unfurl like a blackened rose petal stained with sorrow. Ishtar, clutching the vial as if it were a talisman against the creeping void, navigated the maze of corridors that twisted like the serpent of legend itself. Each step echoed with the whispers of the fallen, their silent screams etched into the walls, a chorus of agony that no prayer could soothe. In the great hall, the king's younger brother Marsin moved with deadly intent, a tempest cloaked in regal finery. His eyes were pools of cold fire, flickering with unspoken malice. He had long nursed the bitter poison of envy, his heart a crucible of dark ambitions. The massacre was no accident. It was a carefully woven tapestry of ruin, threads of treachery pulled taut by his unseen hand. Each fallen noble, each convulsing victim, was a sacrifice on the altar of his thirst for power. Ishtar's mind raced. The vial, the antidote, was not merely a cure but a symbol, a fragile spark of defiance in a world consumed by shadows. But who deserved salvation in a feast designed to breed death? Her hesitation was shattered by a sudden cry, a piercing wail that shattered the fragile veil between life and oblivion. It was the Princess Zephyra, the last beacon of innocence in a court drowning in corruption. She lay crumpled near the dais, her face pale but eyes aflame with desperate will. Ishtar rushed to her side, hands trembling as she uncorked the vial. The precious liquid shimmered like liquid starlight, a potion distilled from hope itself. As the antidote touched Zephyra's lips, a transformation began, a flicker of life, rekindled amidst the ruins. But the palace was far from safe. Amarsan's guards swept through the chambers like ravening wolves, their swords flashing under torchlight, eyes gleaming with fanatical devotion. The clash was brutal and swift. Ishtar and Zephyra fled through hidden passages known only to the palace, soldier servants twisting tunnels choked with dust and secrets. The walls seemed to close in, a suffocating tomb of ancient stone and whispered curses. Every shadow was a threat, every breath a fragile defiance against the encroaching abyss. Outside, the city of Babylon stirred uncertainly, its people oblivious to the carnage within their sacred walls. The markets prepared to open, children laughed unaware, and the river Euphrates flowed with serene indifference. Yet beneath this veneer of normalcy, the city was poised on the precipice of chaos. Amarsan, having seized control, began to enact his merciless purge. Those who survived the feast were branded traitors, hunted relentlessly in the streets, their screams swallowed by the sprawling labyrinth of Babylon. Amidst the turmoil, Ishtar's resolve hardened. She was no longer merely a frightened girl, but a guardian of truth and hope. The antidote she carried was a beacon, a defiance against the tide of darkness threatening to consume the land. She vowed to rally those who remained unbroken, to expose Amarsan's treachery to the world, and to honor the memory of those lost to the feast's cruel hunger. But fate is a cruel puppeteer, and its strings are tangled with tragedy. The palace's deepest secrets began to unravel, revealing betrayals older and darker than any had dared imagine. The oracle's prophecy whispered anew, warning of a doom that no antidote could stem, a shadow that would linger long after the last candle flickered out. As Ishtar and Zephyra disappeared into the sprawling city, their footsteps echoed the final stanza of a dirge for Babylona, lament woven from blood, betrayal, and the faint glimmer of hope born from the ashes. The night was a raven's wing spread across Babylon, swallowing the city in its cold embrace. Ishtar and Zephyra moved through winding alleys cloaked in shadows, the weight of despair heavy on their shoulders. The streets, once vibrant with life, were now eerily silent, haunted by the ghosts of those devoured in the name of power and greed. The antidote, so fragile and precious, rested in Ishtar's trembling hands, a fragile ember in a world consumed by darkness. The city's heart pulsed with fear. Amarsan's reign was merciless, his thirst for domination leaving no soul untouched. Whispers of rebellion flickered like dying embers among the oppressed, yet the weight of tyranny crushed hope beneath its iron heel. Every corner bore the marks of his cruelty, walls painted with blood-red graffiti, the echoes of mournful cries trapped beneath the stone. Ishtar's mind was a tempest of conflicting emotions, grief for the fallen, fury against the usurper, and a desperate longing for justice. The antidote was not merely a cure, but a symbol, a beacon calling the fractured remnants of Babylon to rise from the ashes. Yet, even as she nurtured this fragile hope, the shadows of the past clawed at her resolve. Within the opulent walls of the palace, Amarsan sat upon the throne crafted from betrayal and despair, his eyes hollow yet burning with a ruthless fire. His victory was hollow, a Pyrrhic conquest stained with blood and madness. The ghosts of the feast haunted him, their silent accusations seeping through the cracks of his fractured soul. His ambition had devoured everything: family, honor, humanity, and left behind a monstrous shell. Meanwhile, Ishtar and Zephyra found refuge among a secret enclave survivors hidden in the catacombs beneath the city. Their faces were etched with sorrow, their eyes reflecting the horrors they had witnessed. Among them were scholars, priests, and warriors united by a single purpose: to reclaim Babylon from the abyss. The antidote's power was their rallying cry, a promise that the darkness could be vanquished. The night air was thick with the scent of jasmine and fear as Ishtar stood before the gathered crowd, her voice a trembling flame igniting courage in the hearts of the broken. She spoke of sacrifice, of the banquet that had consumed their kin, and of the poison that had nearly ended their world. But she spoke also of resilience, the indomitable spirit that no tyranny could extinguish. Yet, fate's cruel hand was not done weaving its tragic tapestry. News arrived that Amasin had discovered their refuge, his forces closing in like a tide of death. The survivors prepared to fight, their weapons crude but they were ironclad. The coming battle was not merely for survival, but for the soul of Babylon itself. As dawn approached, the catacombs trembled with the clash of steel and the roar of defiance. Ishtar fought alongside those she had vowed to protect, her heart a tempest of fear and determination. Blood stained the sacred stones, and the air was rent with cries of pain and hope intertwined. The battle was fierce and unrelenting, a desperate struggle against the shadows that sought to consume them. In the final moments, as the sun's first light pierced the darkness, Ishtar faced Amasin amidst the ruins of a shattered altar. Their eyes met a collision of despair and fury, of broken dreams and ruthless ambition. The antidote, the fragile hope she bore, was held between them, a symbol of all that was lost and all that could be saved. The fight was brutal, a dance of shadows and light, until finally, Amasin fell defeated not by sword but by the truth that no darkness can silence forever. Ishtar's victory was Pyrrhic. The scars of the feast would linger in Babylon's soul, a haunting reminder of the price of power and the fragile beauty of hope. As the city began to heal, Ishtar looked to the horizon at dawn, tinged with sorrow yet brightened by the promise of renewal. The banquet of flies had devoured many, but from its ashes rose a tale of resilience, a story etched in blood and memory, whispered through the ages as a warning and a testament. The shadows of Babylon's darkest hour would never fully fade, but neither would the light of those who dared to defy them.